Welcome back to MMA Al Dente, the only MMA YouTube channel who picked Estela Nunes to defeat Jasmine Yaragui. Or Yasmin Yaragui, I don't know. Anyway, Wonderboy Thompson versus Kevin Holland. I'm going to talk about this entire fight card, which produced one great event, many great moments that I can't wait to talk about. Roman Dolidze, fucking Michael Johnson, all the way down to the end. But I'm going to start at the top with Wonderboy Thompson taking out Kevin Holland. He took him out in round 4, or, between rounds 4 and 5. And he looked damn good doing so. Wonderboy was firing on all cylinders. He had a rough first round. Kevin Holland's reach did find his chin. And also Kevin Holland striking. I think he even outstruck Wonderboy in that first round. But it was a very close round. And Kevin Holland, I thought, won it with a big moment. And that's the story of Wonderboy Thompson on the feed. You can win the big moments. You've got, most fighters have a bigger, more powerful right-hand punch than Wonderboy does, depending on which stance he's in, I guess. But Wonderboy will win the small moments. That's what happens in most of his fights. You can win the big moments against him, but when the small moments add up, Wonderboy won that fight. Or he got the better, he scored more points, I should say. And that's what happened here. Wonderboy just accelerated as the fight went on, looked so good down the stretch. And that fourth round was a 10-8 in my book. Could have been a 10-3. But Kevin Holland showed toughness and grit, broke his hand early in round 1, which did visibly compromise him, especially for somebody who obviously insisted on a stand-up fight, because they did hit the ground early in round 1, where theoretically, and I'm sure realistically, Kevin Holland is the more dangerous fighter. And he seemed to oblige some sort of gentleman's agreement, and he got up on his feet. And I think helped Wonderboy up, and then proceeded to get his ass kicked, pretty much. But still, it was an admirable performance from Kevin Holland. And he, I don't want to say his stock really rose in this one, but it didn't drop too far at all. The fans were absolutely in love with him in the end, but still, this was the Wonderboy Thompson show. Wonderboy looked as good as he's looked in a long time. It was a vintage Wonderboy performance. We've seen him go against many dangerous guys and just tune them up like this. Vicente Luque, Jeff Neal, fucking Rory McDonald, whoever the hell else. And this still, I think it was an eye-opening performance in a lot of ways, just based on hearing DC say, this guy should retire. He should retire. It's never going to get as good as this. I think it's already been as good as this, but still, this was, one of the best performances of Wonderboy's career, one of his finest nights, and what makes this eye-opening in any way would be his age. He's almost 40. He'll be 40 years old in a few weeks, and he still looked that fast, that sharp, and that durable. He was hurt early in round 1, survived, fought his way out of it, and still looked good in the end of that round, and really just took over the fight from that point. And it was an excellent performance. As for Wonderboy's career now, he's approaching 40, like I said. He's definitely approaching the end, but he says he's still got his sights set on the title. He just doesn't want to take these grappler fights, which, if you're going for the title, you got to go through the grapplers. And, you got guys in like Shavkat and Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad that are in between him and the title. I don't know if Shavkat is. I don't know what his ranking is, but it wouldn't surprise me if Shavkat could be number 3 right now, and it wouldn't surprise me. He could be number 10. I don't know, but I know he's one of the best fighters in the world. And Wonderboy, he's gunning for a striking battle with Jorge Masvidal. Last night on the show, the post-fight show, they brought up Conor McGregor, and he jumped all over that. Said, yeah, I'd love that. I'd love to see him fight anybody on the feet, just because I love watching him strike. But, questions of merit come into play if you start gunning for a title shot and you're not looking to fight grapplers, And I know he's fought plenty of them throughout his career, but still, you know what I'm saying. Wonderboy, I really hope he gets the title shot, and I hope he does so just fighting pure strikers. But I totally understand if they get realistic about it and say, we love you, Steven, but you got to get through Shavkat or Gilbert or whoever. But great performance from Wonderboy. He looked fucking amazing. I thought he really turned it up towards the end. switching stances, throwing everything, spinning, all of his spinning attacks. I want to say the majority of them landed right on Kevin Holland's head. And Kevin Holland is tough as all fuck. So Wonderboy got to put on a clinic, and he really did. Again, I thought he had the gigantic fourth round where, it would have been impossible for Holland to win on points at that point, even despite having won round one. And it was an excellent performance from Wonderboy. I can't stop talking about it. I want to rewatch the fight. I'm not sure if it was the fight of the year. There was a lot of that talk in the middle and towards the end of the fight. I think it needed to be a little more competitive, but still, it was the fight of the night, and it was an excellent television experience at midnight over here on Long Island. But, great. And the next fight was RDA, who smoked Brian Barberena. He didn't smoke him, I guess. I guess he got to get the finish in round one, but it was an excellent performance from RDA. It was trip takedowns, grappling. I mean, you kind of, I don't know, I knew he's a better grappler than RDA, than Brian Barberena, but I didn't think he would be able to impose his grappling. And I know that's a stupid thing to think. I just have it in my head as these fighters get older, they get away from their grappling. And RDA is one of them, where, it's not even his grappling, it's his wrestling. He's not strong enough to get it there. And that was the case here. Brian Barberena is not the most technical guy. He's slow and plodding, and RDA was able to work his magic, and he looked like the RDA of old. This was like a classic performance of his. That's how he started off in the UFC. He was much more of a pure grappler. And, of course, his hands came together, and he's a dangerous package everywhere. But this was vintage shit, and a great performance. Brian Barberena suffers a tough defeat. He's a guy who has been obviously not the greatest grappler. I feel like that's pretty obvious. It's apparent when you watch him fight. But to submit him is something altogether different. And this was a nice feather in RDA's cap. I know Brian Barberena doesn't look like the greatest victory, I should say, on his record. But to go through him like that was very impressive, because a lot of guys have tried and nobody's succeeded like RDA. Vicente Luque had to have a tooth and nail last second finish to get by Brian Barberena. And RDA looked great. Great performance from RDA. As I talk about 40-year-olds and whatever. I think he's 38 or something, RDA. But again, he's one of the older guys, and it's cool to see the older guys fight like that. He was a gigantic favorite, but still, he fought like a favorite. He made himself look worthy in the eyes of the bettors. And that's a tough thing to do as a minus 550, but yeah, he got it done. Mateus Nicolau takes out Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell is just awesome. He'll still be one of my favorite fighters. Same with Darren Elkins. But Schnell, his chin is a problem. It's a problem. It's a cause for concern at that weight class, 125, a guy that gets finished with strikes that frequently, even though he's only fighting killers, Pantoja, and two of those knockout losses were at 135, to Rob Font and Hector Sandoval. But nevertheless, his chin is compromised, Matt Schnell. I do think if you told me he lost 5 fights in the next 5 years, I would guess at least 3 of them were via strikes. And that's something you could probably guess for a heavyweight, but for a flyweight, it's unusual. So, sucks for Schnell, but Nicolau is a very good fighter. This guy is neutralizing, and I felt like we saw a lot of that. He has his moments when he drops Schnell and whatever, and he's, aggressive, but in between those moments of aggression, Nicolau is just slowing things down. He's a really tough guy to have any sort of success with on the feet, on the ground. He's a neutralizing fighter, sucking you into that big right hand, and eventually, 7 minutes into the fight, he found it and face planted Schnell and put him away. So, great win for Nicolau, who's striking. Like I said in the pre-fight interview, it's evident this guy's got power. It's obvious. He's a good striker, and it's better than his record indicates. I said the same for Schnell, by the way, but I trust Nicolau's durability more than I do Schnell's, and that seemed to be the case here. So, tough loss for Schnell. Great win for Nicolau. Guy's on a 5-fight winning streak now. He could fight anybody. He could fight for the title. You won't hear me complain. I know he's not going to, but I'm just saying he's worthy at this point. And he's going to have to fight someone a little more, revered, whatever, a little more respected, like Pantoja or whatever. But he's one win away from a title shot at most. So, great win for Nicolau. Sergey Pavlovich versus Tai Tuivasa. You watch a fight like that, or at least I did, and I go, shit, kind of wish I bet on that one. Because I was afraid. I didn't trust either one of their styles against the other one. So I stood away from it. But my prediction, because I had to go one way or the other, was Pavlovich wins, and it looks exactly like the Derek Lewis fight. And that's pretty much what happened. Tough loss for Tai Tuivasa, but he was just overwhelmed. This guy Pavlovich, he's a problem for anybody. Just with that blitz. I mean, this guy's got incredible power, deceptively good speed on the feet, and size. Yeah, he's got size, and put it all together, his aggression, size, power, speed. And he's going to take out a lot of fighters in round one. He already has, of course. It's a majority of his victories. But you're seeing why at the highest of levels here. Or close to it. So speaking of the highest of levels, that's where he's got to go next. I don't know who he's fighting, but it's going to be another main event star of the heavyweight division. I don't know, Cyril Gane, Curtis Blades, one of those guys. But I think he's done fighting guys with no names, even though Tuivasa's got a gigantic name. But yeah, Pavlovich, it's on for this guy. He is a top contender, and he's a guy who, much like Nicolau, where there are plenty of guys who are more deserving of the title fight, but you could throw him in the title fight, certainly on an emergency, and you won't hear me complain at all. I'll be excited for it, and might even be picking him to win. So he's worthy. Excellent performance. Sucks for Tai Tuivasa. I always want to see the celebration and the fucking shoey and all that, even though I'm fucking disgusted by that. But sucks for him to lose like that. He's a guy who's been tough. He hasn't really been steamrolled. Been finished a few times. Cyril Gane, Junior Dos Santos, and Sergey Spivak, but never like this. Pavlovich ran through him. And Pavlovich, again, he's going to run through a lot of guys. So, can't wait to see him fight next. Speaking of which, Roman Dolidze. Roman Dolidze shocked the hell out of me. I wouldn't say shocked the hell out of me. But, I thought he could win. But I didn't think he'd win like that. I thought he could win by strikes in the second round even. But I didn't think it'd look like that. I thought it would be cracking Hermansson's chin with some wild shit on the feet or whatever. In fact, I said you want to stay away from the leg locks. Not that he went with your, conventional heel hook like he usually does. But as soon as he tied up that calf slicer, I said, uh-oh, Hermansson, you don't want to just get off the ground with this guy. You don't want to be on the ground with him. And he flattened Hermansson out, who is an elite fighter, with a calf slicer after throwing up an inverted triangle and all kinds of wacky shit. He's wacky. Dolidze, on the ground and on the feet, and I love it. I love the way this guy has had such success in the last year. Incredible success, coming off that knockout over Phil Hawes, which was what, like 3 events ago? Maybe like 5 weeks ago at most. I feel like it was like 3 weeks ago. But just an amazing year for Dolidze, Roman Dolidze, taking this fight, filling in for Derek Brunson, and stepping up against Jack Hermansson on short notice is just very ballsy, and I didn't expect it to pay off. I knew it could, but if it did pay off, I didn't expect it to look like that. A calf slicer into a TKO. I've never seen that. I've been watching MMA for so long. You don't see too many calf slicer attempts, let alone, not that he even got the finish there, but he got the TKO finish. He pinned Hermansson down where Hermansson couldn't move, and just pounded the shit out of him. That was such a unique finish. I'm glad he got the bonus. And with that and his win over Phil Hawes, and again, a lot of his success in both fights coming from him tying up a leg in one way or another, I'm really high on Roman Dolidze. That loss to Trevin Giles is just disappearing from my mind with each performance of his. And I'll never stop talking about how impressed I am with Dolidze. Sucks for Hermanson. He was fighting Derek Brunson just a few weeks ago, and not that that was a lock or whatever, but Derek Brunson is a guy who's older, kind of on his way out, and a little sloppier than a guy. Well, I don't know if he's sloppier than Dolidze. Dolidze's pretty wild anyway, but he's definitely not as dangerous as Dolidze. Derek Brunson has that left hand, which brought him plenty of knockouts throughout his career. But Dolidze is the wild young man who is dangerous. And Hermanson, I still thought he'd be able to tame Dolidze over the course of 15 minutes. And he did well in round one, but Dolidze, he's too wild. He's too technical. He's too damn good. I think I've underestimated his skill overall. And maybe even his cardio a little bit I've underestimated, because I don't remember exactly when that finish was, but I think it was in the second half of the second round. So he got a deep finish on short notice in unique fashion. Great win for Dolidze. Just can't wait to see him again. Eric Anders took out Kyle Dawkins. This is one that I got wrong completely. I did think Anders could do what he did, overwhelming, physicality and athleticism being the difference, not to mention striking. But I thought he was too slow to make anything work against Dawkins. And in reality, he was too fast for Kyle Dawkins. And he really put it on him. Dawkins was knocked around in that fight, and in the end, he just succumbed. He succumbed, and Eric Anders looked like a TKO machine from the beginning there. And I'm glad that it produced a finish for him. His aggression here, because a lot of times we've seen Anders, and certainly in his last one against Junyon Park, throw down, fight hard, and come up on the wrong end of a shitty decision, even the right end of a decision, but it's always a sloppy affair. This was just a destruction for 8 minutes. It was an excellent performance from Eric Anders. He's a guy who's pretty long in the tooth, and Kyle Dawkins, was the big favorite here, the future, whatever. And Anders put a nail in that coffin. It was fucking awesome. Really cool to see Eric Anders win like that. Philip Rowe knocked out Nico Price, or TKO'd him. This was a good performance from Philip Rowe. It had everything. It had everything, including the adversity he faced in round 3, where I thought he was going to be TKO'd. But Philip Rowe is a damn good striker. I did think he'd be uncomfortable in there with Nico Price, and despite the significant reach and height, I thought he would be losing the point battle, just with Nico's comfortability, striking, if that's a word. But Philip Rowe looked damn good, was leading the dance, kicked ass, backpacked him, a lot of success in those first 2 rounds. And then in round 3, that's really where he shined. He got his ass kicked and came back within the same round to get the finish over the veteran. It was an eye-opening performance, and I don't think he got oh no, he missed weight. He may have gotten a bonus if he didn't miss weight, but he missed weight, so no bonus. And regardless, he got a 3rd-round finish over Nico Price. And in a lot of ways, I expected that fight to go like the opposite of the way it did. So, great win for Philip Rowe. Eye-opening. He's got to get his weight under control. Again, he's got reach and height over everybody, but yeah, you got to make weight. So, but still, he can be forgiven. Let's see him move forward, make weight, and I want to watch that guy fight killers, because he himself is a killer. Angela Hill took out Emily Ducote. Angela Hill was the better fighter for 15 minutes. I don't know if Ducote was ever really in that. She wasn't mixing anything up. I thought she had takedowns in her that at the very least could have made Angela Hill slow down, question her own striking. But instead it was just Angela Hill leading the dance, being the quicker striker. Angela looked amazing, really, in this one. And I know she's had better performances, getting finishes over Canalosi and whoever, but this was one of her finest moments here, razor thin fight to the point where I didn't even want to make a prediction, although I think I did. And I said, all right, gun to my head, I'll go Ducote. just because I've seen Angela Hill get robbed so much, but I expected a razor-thin fight here, and instead Angela Hill outclassed her opponent, and she looked fantastic. So Angela Hill, she's got wins over Lupita Godinez, Emily Ducote. These are all solid fighters. Doesn't help that her record's like, there's a lot of red on her record. She's got a lot of losses, but she's a girl where, you can read her, whatever her record is, 18-14 or some shit. It's an abysmal record, but everybody knows that this girl is maybe even on the higher end of the UFC strawweight division. She is, and at the very least, she is a bona fide UFC level fighter in anybody's mind, and takes performances like this to remind everybody of that. So, great performance from Angela Hill. I thought she kicked ass. Tough loss for Ducote. She looked really good against Jessica Penne, Angela Hill's teammate, and I'm sure that helped. And Angela Hill just outclassed her here. So, great performance from the veteran. Speaking of which, Clay Guida takes out Scott Holtzman. These guys are both veterans, but let's face it, when you're talking about the veteran in this one, you're talking about Clay Guida. Guida, whatever he's got, 50, 60 fights, I don't know. But he's a guy who's old, 40 years old himself, and he's still got that hustle. Clay Guida, all of his wins look the same pretty much, or damn close to it, and that's awesome. He's a consistent fighter. He's a guy that will always have that wrestling in his back pocket. It may not find him success, but at the very least, it's going to slow his opponent down. And I thought it was effective in doing so, even without the success of the takedowns, which he eventually found. But Scott Holtzman, I thought, and I still think he's the more powerful striker. I was a little concerned with his chin, but he wasn't able to get Guida off of him. He needed to be able to stuff takedowns better and circle out and fight his fight. And instead, Guida imposed his game. And Clay Guida scratched and clawed to get a split decision there. In the end, Scott Holtzman retired. I should mention that. He had an excellent career in the UFC. Wasn't so long or whatever, but still, he didn't just come and go. He's had some nice wins throughout his career. Jim Miller, whoever the hell else, I don't know. But Scott Holtzman retired on a very tight fight with Clay Guida. Could have gone either way. I thought Guida got the better of him, and I'm kind of glad the decision went his way, even though I bet on Holtzman to win via decision. But, yeah, Scott Holtzman, he hung tough, pretty much. He was only taken out by Beneil Dariush and Mateusz Gamrot. And aside from that, he's been a very tough guy to get out of there, and it was no different last night. Clay Guida gets the big victory, and really cool to see for the fans of the veterans. Speaking of which, Michael Johnson takes out Mark Diakiese. This was a good Michael Johnson performance, kind of a classic one. The first round was pretty close, but second and third round is where Johnson really took over the fight with his boxing. Johnson's just a damn good wrestle boxer. When he's firing on all cylinders, he's as good of a wrestle boxer as there is. And he was too much for Diakiese. I think Diakiese, I don't know if he came in looking to wrestle or, waiting to wrestle in the end or what his game plan was. But, his wrestling, even though it's improved or whatever, Michael Johnson's wrestling has always been maybe a little, I don't know if it's underrated or overrated, but at this point I think it's underrated because a lot of people have had success with him. But Michael Johnson, first and foremost, is a wrestler. And he was able to fight his fight here. And his hands are going to be a problem for anybody on the feet. Anybody at all, including the guys that knocked him out, like Josh Emmett and Justin Gaethje. Michael Johnson has hurt both those guys, dominated both in a sense, and anybody else that has obliged him to largely box on the feet, strike on the feet, he's generally kicked their asses too. So, great win for Michael Johnson. Scratched and clawed for a big one. He's had some big wins in recent memory and kept his UFC career alive. Diakiese's a guy who just took out Slava Claus and the other guy, drawing a blank. But either way, seemed to have turned a corner with his wrestling, and Michael Johnson shut that down. So, great win for Michael Johnson. And His UFC career keeps going. Jonathan Pierce takes out Darren Elkins. This was largely a dominant performance. Elkins is sloppy. Like I said, that's why he's my favorite fighter. He doesn't have the technical advantage over anybody. Anybody. I mean, you'd have to throw him in on the regional scene to see all of his skills come together. He'd get some knockouts, I'm sure. Get some first round submissions. But at the UFC level, he's at a technical disadvantage to anybody, everybody pretty much, certainly on the feet. And Jonathan Pierce comes out right away, throws a front kick on Elkins. I think it landed right on his face, and was really dictating the stand-up. I thought he was winning the stand-up, and on the ground, even though Elkins had a few nice moments where it looked like he was going to secure back control, Pierce was able to defend himself and keep his hips free and eventually spin out into Elkins and suffocate him from the top. There were a few moments where it looked like it could have been finished, but that was just optics again. Like I said, he's got the worst optics in the history of MMA. And this was more of that, where he was covered in blood, like someone said, DC or whatever. He bleeds on the way to the octagon. And Pierce was landing good ground and pound. Elkins was trying to move out of the way, but for a second there, it looked like it could have been stopped in round 2, I believe. But he hung tough, and Elkins in round 3 had that great Elkins moment where the ref was they paused to have the doctor look at the fight, look at his cut, and Elkins said on camera, "It's a fight." And then they let him go fight, and he brought it to Jonathan Pierce. I didn't think he won there. He lost all 3 rounds, in my opinion, but it was evident, just from round 3 there. Yeah, if this fight went with no time limit, it's probably a 50-50 fight, if not 60-40 Elkins. But there's a time limit, and for the skills shown within that time limit, Jonathan Pierce was the man. Jonathan Pierce now is 5-0 since his loss to Joe Lozon. Darren Elkins, even though he's not ranked and whatever, he's a big name, been a co-headliner. I think Pierce needs a big name next, and he needs maybe even a ranked fighter. I want to see Jonathan Pierce fight the best in the division, and I'm really high on him. He suffered some losses earlier in his career, 2 first-round submissions, and then the first-round TKO to Lozon. I am worried about a cold start or whatever moving forward, but Jonathan Pierce, there's no reason to doubt him based on what you've seen inside the UFC. This guy is a guy who, maybe he doesn't have the strongest first round, but his second and third rounds, he takes over every fight, much like Elkins himself. So I'm really high on Jonathan Pierce, and I'm glad he's done fighting Darren Elkins so I can start rooting for him again. Because Pierce is precisely the kind of fighter I can get behind. Just a fucking gritty warhorse that builds as the fight goes on. Natan Levy, I think I always start off saying Levy, and then the commentators call him Levy, and I go, oh yeah, it is Levy. But Levy took out Genaro Valdez. Valdez is still, he's 0-2 in the UFC, but I really like him as a fighter. He's fun to watch, but I don't think he's long for the UFC. I speculated on that before the fight, and now afterwards, I don't know. He's still fun, though. But Natan Levy is a well-rounded fighter. He's more than just a grappler. Like I said, coming into the fight, I thought the TKO odds were off, and I did bet on Levy to win via TKO. And that includes standing knockout, which I thought was possible, just watching Valdez get dropped 4 times or 5 times even against Frivola. But he hung tough. He was able to take it, Valdez. Levy was able to give it, and they both had their moments, but generally speaking, Levy dictated this fight here, and he looked good. So Levy, I don't even know what his UFC career is now. His UFC record, 3-1, but he's got momentum, no doubt about it, and I can't wait to see him fight again. And then he did challenge Kanye West to a fight afterwards on behalf of Israel or something, which that'd be kind of cool, but I don't think it's going to happen. Francis Marshall takes out Marcelo Rojo. This went about the opposite of how I predicted it. This was maybe my last prediction for this fight, that Marshall wins via standing knockout or, clean knockout there. But he did. Marshall looked really good. I thought there were times where, oh, this is it. Rojo cracked him in the middle of the first round. Now we're going to see, he's going to be on skates. The wheels are going to come off. But no, he stood with it. Marshall, I don't even remember when he got the knockout, if it was round 1 or round 2. I think it was the end of round 1. Probably should have looked this shit up beforehand. But still, it was eye-opening to see that guy get that kind of knockout. He's 23 years old. He fights pretty composed. I mean, the most you saw him get excited was after the knockout. But in the middle of the fight, I trust him in a firefight. He was fighting a guy with a lot more experience, who was theoretically more dangerous, certainly with his strikes, having gotten some TKO finishes and KOs, plenty of them. I think 16 KO finishes for Marcelo Rojo. And instead, this guy Marshall, Kurt Pellegrino's prospect, 6-0, 23 years old, and he's the one that gets the knockout over Marcelo Rojo, who I think was only ever TKO'd in the 3rd round by Charles Jourdain, which was not a knockout. So this was eye-opening in a lot of ways. It says a lot about Marshall as a fighter, but it might say something about his power as well, which is, I'm waiting to see. But that was an eye-opening victory. Definitely got that one wrong. And speaking of shit I got wrong, Jasmine Yaragui takes out Estela Nunes. I wouldn't say I got this one totally wrong, but I thought Estela Nunes would win round 1. That's what I said, and based on that, she was my prediction to win the fight. But I knew she had a propensity to slow down. She's been finished a few times inside the distance, and she lost. The Sam Hughes fight was another example of one in which the fight was taken over. Sam Hughes lost round 1 and then took over in the middle of round 2 and ground her to dust. And this was like a different version of that. Estela Nunes cracked Yaragui early on. I thought she was striking well from the outside, moving backwards and having that bigger right hand and also being a little bigger. Everything went according to plan in round 1. And then in round 2, Yaragui, just with her forward pressure, had Estela Nunes on her back foot, speeding away. She put her hands down and boom, caught her with a big right hook and knocked her down, and then just pounded her out, got on top of her, smothered her, and pounded her out. It was, this was destructive. Eye-opening TKO there for Yaragui. I really liked what I saw from her on the ground. I know Estela Nunes, that's typically where she's fallen apart, but, you could watch her fight Ariana Canalosi, and it didn't look like this. Yaragui, again, it was eye-opening. This was a beautiful TKO. And, now Estela Nunes has a record of 6-4. So on paper, it's not the best victory, but it was a damn good one. This was I thought, a good matchup. I picked Estela Nunes to win because I thought she was an underrated 6-3 coming into the fight. And I thought Yaragui might have been a little overrated 9-0. Just a little too inexperienced and young. I know they're experienced matches, but 3 of those fights were in one night. And also, Estela Nunes has fought much better competition. But Yaragui was too much for her. And if they fought again, she'd be a much bigger favorite. So, big win for Yaragui, eye-opening. I want to see where she goes from here. She's a dangerous fighter. I thought she looked good in the Lucindo fight, but this one was awesome. Again, eye-opening shit. All right, so that's it pretty much. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos. And I don't know. I started saying and. I have no way to end the video.